Welcome, everybody, to another edition of BTS Live. That stands for Behind the Scenes Live, episode 19. I can't believe it's 19 already. Welcome. I'm Marty McPadden, and along with me today is my usual partner in crime, Mark Rogers. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing just fine.
Excellent. Good to hear.
Doing fine.
Good to hear. So, Mark, I was talking a little bit in the pre-show about what we're going to cover today. Now, in the past few weeks, it's been all about the technology because we've had audio issues, mostly on my. It's funny because I thought it was on your end, mostly on my end, with your return audio from Skype, and you were doing everything right, and I was like giving you all kinds of grief, thinking, oh, it's got to be your problem, but it wasn't. It was me. So with the help of Stephen Haywood, good friend and very generous person who is the techbuzz.net, we got my audio issue straightened out and did a proper mix minus and all that stuff. And I actually covered that last week in a one-off show. But this week we want to get back to on-camera stuff, right, Mark? And you tonight is the Final Four, the basketball championship, collegiate basketball championship. And I was telling everybody in the pre-show, before ESPN, before you got into management, you were an on-camera sports journalist. You were a sports director at a affiliate I know down south, and a few other affiliates you've worked at. And as part of your job, you've had the opportunity to do location work, go to different locations, and one of them was the Final Four. And you can get into the year and all that stuff. I'll let you get into it, in much more detail. And then the second thing we're going to cover with you is you had the opportunity to speak in front of a group of college students about creating video, and I thought that was good. And I saw the video of that, and I thought that was really, really good. And really kind of the theme here is, again, in front of the camera and where all this stuff can lead to. For you, obviously, you've been professional and you've done it at the highest levels. And for folks on here watching us on our HD platforms as well as on Blab, there may be aspiring journalists, aspiring video creators that could benefit from your experience and your knowledge. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Mark. Why don't you get into it and kind of talk about your experience at the Final Four, and I'm really interested in hearing. It's great timing. I'm glad you texted me earlier about that.
Well, actually, what brought it to mind was about a month ago, I was contacted by my old director and old producer from WCBI in Columbus, Tupelo, Mississippi. And so that's where I was sports director from 1994 to 2000. And during that time, in 1996, the Mississippi State basketball program was the Cinderella story of college basketball that particular season. A very good team, obviously, to make it to the Final Four, but not expected by any of the experts to make that kind of run. And they made it to the Final Four for the first time and only time in school history. So I was there for each step along the way. So that wasn't resonating in regards to it being 20 years since that all occurred, but I was contacted again by director Derek Rogers, no relation, and Mary Carol Sullivan, we call her MC, and it was just great to hear from them. We're friends on Facebook, and we communicate once in a while, but to have extended phone conversations with them was fun. And what they wanted was in producing an anniversary special, which is going to air tonight. I believe it's 6:30 Central Time, WCBI. So just those people in northern Mississippi and western Alabama will be able to see that. Hopefully I can get a hold of that, get a copy for my own viewing pleasure, or maybe cringe a few times and seeing myself 20 years ago.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not that bad, though.
Or also to be able to possibly get it out there and get the link out there. So I'm going to ask them if it's going to be uploaded anywhere that we can all see it.
That would be great. If we can get it, we can show it on the show. That would be awesome to see.
So you're going to see a lot of video of me from 1996 at different stops like Indianapolis and Lexington, Kentucky at Rupp Arena, and then at the Final Four at the Meadowlands close to New York City. And then what they also wanted from me was that they wanted an interview segment where they would ask me questions about my memories of the Final Four run, the team, the camaraderie, the games, everything on and off the court. Because what happens uh, in those situations is, in that case in particular, I covered that basketball team from the opening of practice mid-October, and it's a basketball team. It's not a football team. There are more games. They ended up playing 35 games. And so you see a lot of games. You go into a lot of locker rooms. You interview the players before games, before and after practice during the week. So I would see these guys 3 and 4 times a week on a regular basis, at least that many times, from the beginning of the season in November all the way this season to April. But what happened specifically on that tournament run, as Marty well knows, is the it became uh, a running schedule and repeated schedule week to week, that after they defeated the number one team in the country, Kentucky, at the SEC championship game in New Orleans, that you basically play a tournament that runs Thursday through Sunday. You come home for like a half day to a day to pack, unpack, pack, get ready to go. And then you're leaving on Tuesday to go to another locale and cover all the press conferences, all the practices. It's funny how you see the team actually practice during the season, and then they have kind of these for show practices for CBS and then for the local media outlets across the country, where they kind of just run through the motion just for us to get video of practice. And then you get your interviews both in the locker room, on the side of the court, wherever you can get them, depending on what kind of access you have. And for me, fortunately, I was close with the team, close with the coach, and they gave me great access. And so it was from stop to stop, and you're with the team from, let's say, Tuesday through Sunday, and then you're flying home, you're repacking, as long as they're winning. And then you've got a lot of people at home either wanting them to lose because you got a wife and kid at home, or on the other hand, obviously being big Mississippi State basketball fans, wanting the ride to continue. So
Let
this
me
went on
interject there.
from
How is the travel situation? I mean, because you hear about this with the teams themselves, and that's they have a whole, I think, department within the NCAA to because the brackets don't come out until Sunday, and now the first games I think are either, is it Tuesday or Wednesday?
well, there are play-in games
Yeah.
for four particular teams on Tuesday and Wednesday, but for the bulk of the field, the other 64 teams, they either start on Thursday or Friday. So as running a sports department, as I did, and booking flights and hotel accommodations for these type of events, this was the most concentrated situation I ever had to deal with. It was typically an SEC media days for 3 or 4 days, or it was a Peach Bowl in Atlanta, SEC championship games that would be played in Atlanta. That was one event, and maybe a couple of days prior we would get there and deal with all the practices and press conferences. But this was repeated, and you didn't know where. You knew that if the team won, you were headed to blank. But that first stop, as you started to allude to, Marty, you don't know where they're going to be placed until late Sunday afternoon. You don't know where you're headed.
Now, I'll just say, were you covering one particular local team, or was it more the general tournament itself, or was it kind of a mixture?
Yeah. So being located, again, I say Columbus and Tupelo, Mississippi, they're about an hour apart. That was the market at the time, and still is. We had a bureau in Tupelo, and we were located in Columbus, Mississippi, there at WCBI. So we were located, and they still are, only about 25 minutes from campus at Mississippi State University, about 2 hours from Ole Miss, but because of the coverage area, they were just as much in play as Mississippi State. And then we were only about 45 minutes west of the University of Alabama. So we covered three SEC schools. And if you know anything about sports, football in particular, you better be on top of it. So most people that we would go on the road, and we would run into other affiliate stations, local broadcasters from, name the town or the city in the South, Birmingham, Knoxville, Memphis, on down the line. And they could be focused on one school, one team, and they would just ride it all the way through. It made it a lot more difficult, but it was a lot more fun And for me, I get kind of bored with one subject. So it was nice to have three options in regards to the teams that we would cover. So we would go to bowl games, NCAA tournaments, SEC championship games, whether they involved any one of those three teams. So we had, just as long as there was one good team out of the three, we knew we were headed to postseason play. I covered a couple College World Series as well, with Mississippi State and Alabama in the mix. Yeah, so it was a whole lot of fun. So this brought back a lot of memories because what they wanted from me, in addition to looking up old footage from the Final Four run, because we did, and it's so funny how you get detached from your past and just forget about what you did, and then if you have a conversation with somebody, things just start to come back in situations and plane rides and issues with hotels. And what I started to get into is um, at least once you get that initial designation into the bracket, then you can foresee where you're headed if the team continues to win.
Yeah, you
So
go.
we
Yeah,
knew
I
it
guess you
was
go
going
with
to be
the seating, right? I mean, you're going to kind of predict a little bit. Let me toss this question out to you, Mark.
sure.
You know, do you when you're out on the road? Obviously, you're seeing other affiliates, and you get. I would imagine you get to know other journalists on the road. Is it more of a, and it might be something different. Is it more of a friendly atmosphere, kind of camaraderie, colleague type of thing, like a small circle, or is it competitive, or is it a little of both? How'd that kind of work out there?
It's definitely a little bit of both because we would see our staff, our crew, we would see the same reporters. Both newspaper at that time was obviously huge, and they were almost considered the standard at that point. And us TV guys were kind of like just kind of flying in, and they would some of them wouldn't take too highly to what we did because you're more the new media and so forth and so on. So I'm talking 20 years ago. But yeah, we would show up, let's say a standard football season on Monday. I had my choice of either going to Alabama or Ole Miss, and I would send the other guy to the other site to interview the coach, go to the press conference, interview the players. They bring in players. You'd make player requests the weekend prior to, depending on what happened that previous Saturday's game. And so my Monday was going to Oxford for the Ole Miss press conference or Alabama. We know how big Alabama football is, and really all three of them. You're talking SEC football. And on Tuesday, it was going to Mississippi State to do the whole drill all over again. And so you had to be kind of a beat writer, but in a video mode, because that was the basis of your stories for the rest of the week. The passing game was horrible, so you needed to talk to the quarterback and the wide receivers and the head coach. Now that was all fun and good most of the week, but if there was some sort of controversy, that's when the journalists had to step up.
Yep.
And it wasn't all just this is fun and games and we're talking football. And during the time I was there for 6 years, there were NCAA investigations and violations at all three of those schools. So we can address that at
Well,
some other
I could
time.
imagine what that was like.
Yeah,
Let me kind of go on this topic since we're on these multiple platforms doing the show live. Now on live online video is within the grasp of almost everybody. If you have a phone, you can do online video. We're doing it at a little higher level, hopefully. With fancy switchers and things. And we're also on a platform called Blab. We syndicate over there, and we got a very vibrant chat room over there. So it's very social, and the whole social aspect. And Mark, you've been doing YouTube video for a while now, and you know about the social aspect. And then you worked, at the Final Four, and the events you're describing are really before social media, correct? And now that you know the social aspect, can you talk about how the differences now of the news cycle and how really media kind of, I think they kind of controlled it versus now you have to deal with this social aspect where it's more democratized and where you're sharing information almost minute by minute versus doing it just for the 6 o'clock news. Can you talk to that a little bit?
yeah. So at that point, and what also comes to mind in regards to becoming less sportscaster and more news journalist. NCAA violations, very serious topic. I covered a drowning death of a football player. And what also comes to mind are coaching situations, hirings and firings. And especially in an elite conference like the SEC, that's huge news. So, from the time that somebody is on the hot seat to the time that they get fired, you talk about the rumor mill running and trying to confirm sources and running around making phone calls, which in this day and age, there would be how many people, dozens, if not hundreds of people that would be ahead of me. But at that point, the roles were completely reversed. Those people were out in the public and they were sitting and waiting for me to come on the 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock news to say, you know, this guy's the leading candidate, and we verified that. Or he was in Tuscaloosa today to interview with Alabama, where now we would probably, I would think, I'm not in that situation right now, but as a sportscaster, news reporter, that you would be almost monitoring the social media as much as you would be digging yourself to, because there are people out there that for whatever reason have closer ties than you do, and that's where the news is breaking. Whereas before, those people had no voice and no contact with anything, and they would have to wait for you to verify everything and do the reporting.
Yeah, kind of like the dawn of citizen journalism. It sounds like, back in the day that you're describing before social really came on the scene, you were the ones that were digging up at first, digging up the story and presenting the story and then getting the confirmation. It was all kind of housed under one roof. You guys had full control of that. And the people that were viewing it were strictly consumers. Now, and you see this in local news now, you see it, Mark, just here in Connecticut, where all these stations have an app, right? And they're relying on this citizen journalism. Send us your video, send us your cell phone video. The other interesting trend I think with this is, we're talking about mobile video, right? And the quality level now it's gotten a lot better, but I think the forgiveness factor on less than professional video, getting the content and getting the story versus getting it all polished. Like a news reporter, when you go out with a crew. Now, back in your day, when you were doing this, it wasn't just you. It was you, and I would imagine you'd have at least one other person with you, a cameraman with you. Nowadays, I think it's all kind of a lot of one-man bands, where the reporter will shoot their own stuff, and they have all the digital, and also the equipment is a lot smaller. So I'm not sure if you want to talk about that. As far as I know, you're not living it right now, but again, you work for ESPN. You see the digital side of things. Comparing what you see now versus how it was, do you have a preference from a journalistic standpoint of how what era you'd like to live in or operate in, or that would be an interesting discussion.
Well, the process was a little bit more cut and dried then in regards to what was tried and true and how you would approach a story and how you would approach the operational aspect of getting that story to air. So believe me, if I would, for example, go to the SEC tournament, and if you're familiar with college basketball, these conference tournaments, they'll start playing at noon and they play until midnight that first round. Well, it was key as to when that game was going to be played. If we hit the noon game, great. I've got the noon game. Game's going to be over by 2:15, 2:20. I get my interviews. It's going to be 3 o'clock. I've got 3 hours to edit a package and get it on for the 6 o'clock news, do my live shot. Oh, we've got the 4:45 game. How am I going to work this? Well, the game's going to be going on as we speak. So do we shoot the first half, get those highlights to air? I do my stand-up while the game's still going on. I don't even know what's going on at the game. And then I'm going to have to obviously repackage all that and tell a different story for the 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock news. The timing of all that was completely crucial and random in regards to how you presented the story and how much you could gather at that point to deliver it. And there was also the very conservative approach that certain people would take in regards to, well, at this time I'm cutting us off at 4:30, and whatever I have at that point in regards to video and interviews, I need that time to prepare for the 6 o'clock news. Then there were people like me that would push it to 5:40, or and would be flying in you to see the chaos that you would see at
Ugh.
satellite trucks. And that's the other aspect of this. I typically have a cameraman, and then depending on the distance from Mississippi, we took our satellite truck all the way from Mississippi to Omaha, Nebraska for the College World Series twice. Other times, you're making negotiations with satellite trucks. You're trying to figure out who's taking their satellite truck. Are you going to have to work out of a New York truck? And how accommodating are they going to be? And that was always the nightmare. Once you started to rely on other people, their equipment, their technology, their scheduling, are you the only one that's piggybacking off them? So, hey, they got their guy, they're going to do their show, which you obviously are not priority. They're going to be the priority because they own the truck and they'll give you whatever time they had. Or are they lending this out to four different people and you're standing in line, and even though you got your stuff done and you're ready to roll, you're behind the slow guy that can't edit, and it's taking him 45 minutes to do his package, and you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, I mean, you see this at least when I was there, and you continue to see it even at in ESPN, right? So the digital side of the business has grown so much, and we saw it with being in live sports. I mean, before the web really got going, I remember Baseball Tonight, where and some of the producers there would pride themselves on getting in, and when they did in progress highlights, would pride themselves on getting an in progress home run on the air before they got across the plate. So that was TV part, and that was a little special situation because they were live on the air and they had a whole workflow for that. But now you got the digital side where you're talking about back in the old days where you're hitting a spot. So 6 o'clock news, you have a cutoff, and it's the same every night. So there's no going early. There's no, unless something extraordinary happens, but there's generally no going early now. And you see it at ESPN on the .com side, where you're doing these digital highlights, and I know they pride themselves on getting those in progress highlights up and out as quickly as possible, because speed is not only quality has to be there, but speed is of the essence. And now you have all this technology there that to help you with that, but that's got to add a whole nother layer of complexity to this whole news gathering operation, versus what you were more familiar with back when you were going to the Final Four.
Yeah, so as you know, about 5 years ago, I did some work for .com. I would do some freelance work. And the way that was handled was, let's say it's a typical Major League Baseball night, NBA night, NHL night. I'd come in and I'd look at the list of games, and I would have to very quickly produce a lead for each highlight package, a generic lead. And then we'd go in the green room and I'd knock out 12 or 15, 15 to 20-second stand-ups to intro the game. And then I'd hit the computer and just track 6, 8 games. Let's say there were 6 or 8 at 7 o'clock, and then another handful at 10 o'clock, probably more than that. And then I would just have to track these games, because as soon as that game was over, you get a shot sheet. And I would need to be prepared to voice that highlight when I got the shot sheet.
Can you
get the shot sheet
for the benefit of everybody? Can you tell everyone what a shot sheet is?
Yeah, so a shot sheet, not to talk shop here in particular without explaining, a shot sheet is basically when you see highlights on Sports Center or any show. Uh, let's say there are 45 seconds of highlights, and those are cut up into 5 different plays. Those 5 plays are described for the anchor that's doing the voicing the highlights, but they're described in a very factual way, very cut and dry. The elaboration and the shtick and the style given is all the anchor, but they need to know the black and white information.
Kind of the timing of what is, so if it's like a 3-play highlight, they need to know the timing, kind of just the description, guys, call out at second, whatever, and all the flourishes. I mean, it's not all teleprompter, even though a lot of it's scripted, right? But it's a lot of the flourishes that's where the talent comes in.
So, for example, it would say 3rd inning, Yankees up 2-0, Derek Jeter single to right, Bobby Abreu scores, Yankees up 3-0, and then that's just, and then the the poor anchor would just read that off. Obviously, you're being paid to give that some life, give it some flavor, give it some style. So all of that comes off of just that factual rundown of shot by shot by shot. I'll tell you an interesting story from the SEC tournament one year, and this is the first time I ever called highlights at that level live. The monitor went down,
Oh boy.
so I couldn't see the highlights.
Yeah, what do you do there?
And it went down like right before. Like they pitch it to me, Mark's in Atlanta at the SEC tournament. Ole Miss lost a close one to Florida, et cetera, et cetera. I start taking off on. I'm just talking at first to lead into the highlights. Let's take a look. And right before I'm going to go into the highlights, the monitor goes black. And so what happened was my satellite truck guy was smart enough to say highlights, and then he just went second shot, third shot. And so he told me at what point the next shot was coming. So he was thinking on the fly. I fortunately thought on the fly, and I watched it, and I was amazed that the pacing was perfect. And even though I couldn't see any of it, the description of the plays was right on the mark.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up, Mark, because one of the the original topic of today's show was going to be a continuation of the discussion about how you're creating the Mark and Macy show and some of the challenges and wins and all that, you know, some of the things that you've had to go through to create the process. But one of the things we've talked about, you know, offline about this is, and I've had a lot of discussion with other people, is chemistry. And we, you know, that comes up we've talked a little bit about it on this show about on-camera chemistry between a pair of talent. So, you know, on SportsCenter, you'll have usually two talent doing the show. And the importance, if there's chemistry, especially on a sports show like that, because it is news, but it's also entertainment, it can make or break the show. You know, and there's been some tremendous duos in ESPN history. You know, like Patrick and Olbermann, I think is probably the top. And Charlie, when Charlie Steiner was there, I mean, there's the golden age there, with chemistry, with talent, and there's a lot to be said for that, you know, with chemistry and talent and that type of thing, but you know, there's also chemistry with behind the camera, right? And we both of us have seen it in control rooms, where if you have the chemistry really going, and the story you related, I think, really illustrates that really well, is you guys didn't have to necessarily talk. You worked really well together, so that you can kind of know, the guy who was running the tape knew, okay, no Shashi, so I'm just going to feed it to him. And you kind of worked off each other, you know? So, you know, and that takes a little while. I mean, you see it at ESPN. That's a good reason why they don't change out the crews. They usually keep the same crew together. And I would imagine that was the same for you on the road, or did you kind of keep the same crew together when you guys went out on the road?
Yeah, well, that at that level was contingent upon who was available, who had the desire to go on the road for 3 or 4 consecutive days, and those sorts of things were involved. But I was blessed with a number of capable people, and I bring up the satellite truck operator in particular, who always was the guy. We called him MacGyver, because that guy could stitch together anything at the last second to make it happen. So he was phenomenal, and we had great times on the road, and he was just phenomenal. When you talk about behind the scenes chemistry, the guy that comes to mind is a guy I mentioned off the top, Derek Rogers. He was my director for my entire 6 years. For the 11 o'clock sports, and also for where he really proved himself and had a great rapport was on Friday night during football season. We would do our high school football show. I scripted nothing for that show. So I'd be on there. And what I later found out was that the show was popular to the point that I might as well dive into it right now. So at what point we had a consulting firm come in and let us know where our ratings stood, what the focus groups had to say about us as individuals. Now you talk about an eye-opening.
You know, it's always
experience.
good when the focus groups come in and the consultants come in. So I can imagine how that was.
That's an eye opener, because regardless of how good you are, you're going to hear a few things that you're not real crazy about in terms of their suggestions or maybe some feedback they got from the audience of how you come across on camera and the way you're perceived. I bring this up because when I showed up, we were getting killed by the NBC station. Killed. And I'm happy to say that by the time I got 3 or 4 years into it, we were generally still getting killed in news and weather and at 20 minutes after the hour, which, as you know, viewing trends, especially 20 years ago, were very, very staunch and set.
Yep.
So it's a pretty remarkable thing that at 20 minutes after the hour, we consistently flipped the audience to our CBS station when sports hit. But specifically on Friday night, our Friday Night Football show killed them. And the director, Derek Rogers, this guy was phenomenal. So I did what I was leading to was this was going on for months and months before I knew. We were followed by Letterman. So the news people would turn it over to me at like 11:15, and I had an unscripted show, and I would go as long as I wanted. So I'd go 20, 25 minutes with these football highlights because we would have cameramen at 12 to 15 high school football games, and I didn't script anything. So I'd go on and on and on.
And I think also the other thing to keep in mind, now this is really before the internet really got going, where you had very slick websites and you had this instant access to highlights. You were it in those days, right? I mean,
hung on that show.
You kind of own that whole space where people they couldn't go to the internet, they couldn't go to your stations. In fact, did the station even have a website back then?
No, did not have a website.
Yeah.
So I was there until 2000. I think we were just putting one on the internet at that point. And like you say, you can imagine high school football in Alabama and Mississippi and people wanting their high school football and anybody available. We would throw a camera in their hands. We would literally get to like 15 games a week of high school football highlights. So the 2 points I was going to bring up is that we flipped the audience, which was nice to know. And then secondly, we were followed by Letterman every night on a CBS affiliate. Well, I didn't find out for, I don't think, months that we were doing well enough with our ratings audience that they didn't mind that they started taping Letterman. And so I was spilling 3, 4, 8 minutes into Letterman, and then we were just starting the tape after I was done. So at whatever point I ended, they were good with, and then they just start rolling Letterman. So
they would just turn it around
for Letterman.
They would just turn it around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and go on. I remember in those days, back when we had tape, probably shuttling separate beta tapes to the mass control and putting it on, and just hopefully you don't catch up with yourself. But that says a lot about, number one, the back then, the kind of the times of media where people were, that was it. I mean, especially on the local level, you were dependent on your local affiliate, and you're talking sports, and you're talking an area, like you said, Mark, that is football crazy down there. That, I mean, they are all about the high school football, and Friday night football, it's a tradition. So that's really the only source, versus today where it's completely completely turned upside down, where you have that instant access. And I think people that are younger, they may not necessarily remember, or people that, younger people that just grown up with the internet don't know that that's how it was, and it's just completely different now, So I can imagine, it's interesting. We talked a little bit about, your preferences. Would you rather work back then, or would you rather work today with all the digital tools and also the speed at which things happen? And, again, you see it at ESPN to some degree, but that's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, so since based on my experience of already going through that, I would love to be able to experience it now, which I do to a certain extent, but not on a broad scale with working with 20 and 25 people. That would be interesting because I already know what it was like then. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit, and let's talk about your experience. We teased at the top of the show that you did have an opportunity to speak via video. Now we're kind of bringing it to the present day here, where you're using these tools, these online video tools, and you were either you're probably home and you weren't at the class itself, but you used a video tool, a GoToMeeting, or I forget what it was. It was a Citrix tool or whatever it was. But the ability to be able to go and talk to a group virtually. And your subject again, what you're talking to a college class, and I'd like to elaborate as far as how it went, what you talked about. But I watched the video, and it was fascinating what you're talking about, and the class seemed very, very engaged.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that these two projects and subjects kind of came together in the same week, because then that kind of gave me a nice little segue to talk to this college class, Central Piedmont Community College in North Carolina. So actually, one of the anchor reporters that I worked with at WCBI in Mississippi 15 to 18 years ago, she contacted me because she currently is the broadcasting instructor there, among some other things. And so she wanted to have me on to talk about my experiences with the class. So this was at the same point at which I was being contacted by my old station. And just to kind of put a cap on the first subject, they, in addition to wanting old footage, which I didn't have for them, they had all the old footage for the special that's going to air tonight. They wanted to interview me about my memory of that run, that team, and so forth. So that was actually taped in the ESPN newsroom. So I called.
Your part was.
Yes, I called the
Nice.
assignment desk and I said I'd like to take 15 or 20 minutes. They had no issue with it, so we set it up. Looks really nice. So hopefully we'll get that out to everyone as well.
Perks of the job, right?
Yeah, there need to be some at some point.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking to get that downloaded and cut up, and maybe I'll post that on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, we got to get that. We got to play that on a show, because I think that would be fascinating for people to see that, and yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so I didn't have anyone interviewing me, but I tried to make it look like I did. So I just looked at a question. They sent me questions, and I just put the paper down and started talking. And then I take a breath, take 5 seconds, and I tackle the next question. So yeah, this was a nice little segue to have something else to talk to this college class about. And I basically just went through my experience of working first, determining what I wanted to do, and then going to Kent State University, and the valuable experience I had there, which was really culminated with going to an ABC affiliate. And really what got me my first job was that I was able to get on the air as an intern at the ABC affiliate, which doesn't happen every day. But fortunately, I worked at it, and in addition to logging all the tapes and doing all the internship type tasks, I practiced stand-ups to a point where they felt comfortable putting me on the air. And then once they did, I did reasonably well, I guess, to the point where they put me on over and over and over on those Friday night football games and Saturday afternoon college football games. And so that built my resume. That was my resume tape from my internship, that I could go and get my first job at WNCO as a news anchor and reporter, even though I love to tell the story that I did a cold call and just knocked on the door. So my dad and I drove all over Ohio.
That's a much better story, by the way.
So again, this is the old days, and I'm telling this college class the opportunity that they have today just to get on Facebook, get on Twitter, and contact these people and have immediate access. Now, certain people are going to be closed off and not respond, but like Marty and I talk about all the time, it's amazing the people that will respond and be nice and give you their time. So I said, this is wide open for you guys to get out there on social media and contact people. Most of the people that I have on my show, I just got on Twitter and just sent them a tweet. I don't follow them. They don't follow me. I don't have direct access to their DM, but I just sent them a tweet, and most of the time I get good responses. Back then, I had to get in my car and just drive around the state of Ohio and Western Pennsylvania, just go up to the door, because I called the station 18 times and the station manager wouldn't talk to me, or the news director. So I actually just drove to the station, went, talked to the receptionist, and tried to work my way into a meeting.
Let me interject right there. You bring a really, really good point, Mark. When you just said you got in your car and you had to drive around, just your local area in Ohio to see what opportunities there were. And we talk about this a lot about social, about here are the advantages now of the digital era. about, and the analogy I always like to use is it's like you're enlarging the pond. It's like a big ocean, big pond. Your sphere of influence now, instead of being driving around your car, it's global, and you're not necessarily going to make connections with every person in the world, but the pool of candidates or the pool of possibilities is so much larger now that you have that opportunity. So, I mean, that was great advice that you're talking about with Facebook and some of these tools, and you're using them now with your own content, certainly. So yeah, I just want to echo that point. That's so important versus how it used to be.
Yeah, the story how I got my first job was I actually so I visited two stations in the same day, and they were competing. So I actually visited three stations in the same day in the area of Mansfield, Ohio, which is about 125,000 people. So very small TV market. Mansfield, and then two other towns very close by. So I visited three stations. I don't remember about my first visit, although they offered me a job about 8 years later to be their sports director that I didn't take. But
you made an impression, I guess.
Pardon me?
You made an impression.
Yeah, and they watched me for the next 3 years on that station before I went to Mississippi, and then after I went to Mississippi, they offered me a job. But what was funny, I got two stories here. The first one is hilarious because the type of characters that you run into, especially at that level of television, is amazing. So I knock on the door. I get an interview of sorts, kind of off the cuff, off the fly, with the station manager, and he threw me on the set. I did a quick audition. He interviewed me, and they had kind of a catwalk that looked over the news desk in the studio, and it was noon, and they were doing their noon news. And we stopped, and he showed me the studio, and he said, see that girl at the news desk? And this is after I did my audition. He said, if you take this job, I'll fire her this afternoon.
Wow.
If you'll take this job. So, this guy was more of a character than that. He later, while we're sitting in his office talking, he pops in a videotape of another girl that he wanted a job there, was auditioning. And he's like, isn't she good looking? I said, yeah, she's rather good looking. He said, okay, we'll not go the X-rated route. But he tells me that he goes, if you take this job, I'm hiring her. He said, we have got a room and a bed upstairs.
Oh boy.
So that's my one story from that. I just had to throw that in because I hadn't thought of that in a long time. So the better ending of the story was going to this other station, knocking on the door, going through the entire process of a cold call interview. And this guy, this station director or station manager and news director were interviewing me. I'm selling them on my sports skill and knowledge. And they asked me what I thought of news. And I said, I hate news. I despise it. And
you want to do sports. Well, you want to do the fun stuff.
Yeah, that's all I want to do. Sports. I was tunnel vision from the time I was like 12 years old. So I'm going to be Bob Costas. I've got no time for anything else. So I even took that seriously when I was doing a campus cable on at Kent State, where they'd say, well, we're going to mix things up and you can do the news tonight. I'm not doing the news. I'm a sports guy. but so they tell me after I make this comment that I despise news. I hate it, that they've got a news opening. Well, I was desperate for a job, so I immediately did a 180 and told them, well, I'd love to have the job. So they auditioned me and so forth. And then it hit me a few months later after I got the job. How in the world would they hire me as a news anchor and reporter after I told them that I despised news? And their short answer was, you read the teleprompter better than anybody else.
Oh, sometimes that's all it takes, right? All you can do,
So yeah. So then the stop at WCBI for 6 years in Mississippi, and basically getting back to the talk with the college class, I just kind of took them down memory lane to kind of give them my experience and background, and then opened it up to questions. And they had a myriad of questions, but I was just trying to bring across the point more than anything, and the emphasis that it's all wide open to them and there are no excuses. What were we going to do 20 or 25 years ago, Marty, if we wanted to become polished broadcasters? I'd sit with a newspaper and read it
Yep.
aloud, because what else were you going to do if you didn't have the facilities, and nobody did?
I mean, you couldn't even practice, right? I mean, cameras were expensive. If you're lucky, if you had like a camcorder, but back in the day it was VHS or whatever, and that was expensive stuff. Not everyone had that. Now, I mean, you just whip out your. Everyone has
Yeah.
it in their phone. You can just like do whatever you want and practice. So yeah, I mean, it's
I
totally
told
different.
them, practice, practice, practice. It's all right there on their laptop. That's all they need to do. And then contact people. They've got access to anybody imaginable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I'm just getting things that was fascinating. I mean, again, we talk on the show a lot about technology. I know a lot of people like to hear that, but I think kind of the unique nature of what we both have been through, especially you in front of the camera, and kind of telling these stories and relating these stories. I think you can also relate it down to what people are trying to do, and I think some of the themes that have come up today were patience and consistency. We talk a lot about that. About you don't hear about this is the unglamorous stuff, right? That you hear about. It's hard work, and you got to you got to start kind of at the bottom. Get your experience. Get your practice in. And a lot of people, we talk about the easy button, right? There's really no such thing, and you've lived it. Not only on the professional level where you went to school for it, and you're basically just trying to get a job, so you can get some experience and you work your way up, but also now as you've created your own video, and the Mark and Macy show and the videos that you've been doing. And it's not like you started yesterday on that either. I mean, you've been doing them for well over 5 years, 6 years, I
Yeah.
guess, and it's been a slow building process. And even someone like yourself who had skill and talent going into it, I mean, you continue to learn and all that, and it gets better. And it's certainly, you can read all the guides you want, and we can certainly tell you different things and different tips, but it's really not going to be any good unless you go out there and actually apply it and practice it, right? I mean, I would think from your experience that holds true.
Yeah. There is no substitute for just grinding away, and then taking a bit of a break of sorts to then analyze what you've done and where you stand and what you want to do. So there needs to be a thought process to the grind, but most of it's just the grind. And then being self analytical enough to be able to see what you've done, what's the quality, be very honest with yourself, ask other people that you trust what you're doing, and what ideas they have, and then, restart, refocus, and be better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this is a good place to stop today. We've gone almost 50 minutes. So, Mark, I certainly want to thank you for all the insight. And I think that's some great stories there, stuff that we haven't really covered yet on the show. And we'll certainly do more of this. I mean, this is all good experience. I think that people can take some nuggets from. And again, the theme is, you've been doing it for a long time. You can travel on the road, getting out there. A lot of people don't see, they see the on-camera part, the kind of the glamour, even at a level like ESPN. They see all the fancy sets and all the fancy stuff going on, and the anchors having fun on the set. Again, sports is supposed to be fun. Even at the local level, you're presenting entertainment, having fun, but behind the scenes, it's a lot of work, and you don't get that polished by just showing up on the set and going. I mean, it takes experience and a lot of hard work. So I think that is kind of really the theme that we've had today.
Yeah, I had one friend in particular who was one of many people out there that just think if you're on television, and especially if you're doing, let's say, a 4 or 5 minute sportscast at 6 o'clock, okay, you work for 5 or 10 minutes. What are you doing the rest of the day? They don't understand the whole journalistic process and the editing process, and the operational process of that, but I had him come in and sit with me for a night, and he just couldn't believe that, I'm pulling down satellite feeds at 9:45, and I'm shoving, I've got 50 minutes of video, but I need to find 3 plays, and I've got 4 different decks going at the same time, and I'm editing at 10 after 10 for a 10:20 show, and he just had no idea that it was that kind of scramble every night.
Yeah, I mean, if people could see, I always would tell people when I was at ESPN, and you could relate to this, Mark, that people could see inside a Sports Center control room while the show is on live. They would not believe how the show even gets on the air. It is absolutely, I think the best description I could have is controlled mayhem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and to the untrained observer, it looks like it's complete chaos, but it's very, very organized chaos. And again, everyone has their place, but again, they don't get to that stage without a lot of experience and practice, So it's great stuff. So yeah, I just think that talking about this is great, and kind of puts a perspective on a lot of this stuff that we talk about the 90-10 rule, right? It's really 90% is preparation, leading up to the 10% that you actually see on the air, and nobody sees 90, including backup plans and all kinds of stuff that never hit air and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's very, very important to talk to. I think we'll wrap it up right here. I want to do a couple of things. I want to make people aware of our Facebook group. It's BTS Live. If you go on Facebook and search BTS Live, I believe Barb has put the link in the chat on Blab. But BTS Live on Facebook, everybody is welcome. We are up to, I'm looking at it, 136 members. And it's a great group. Barb started it for us. She's one of the administrators, and she took an interest in us early on. And she's done a great job really being a voice over there. And so Mark and myself are also very active over there, and plus the whole community. So it's a very welcoming place. So we invite you to join us over there at BTS Live on Facebook. Also, I want to remind everybody we have a website, btslive.com. This is where you can see the show live when we do it live. I also run reruns of the recent shows in a wheel, 24/7. That's at least my goal, and I've been pretty good past week. Right now, it's just a single page, but eventually it will be a website as soon as I can get this thing done. I know I talk about it a lot, but it is coming. But that's the plan. I do want to also give a shout out to the techbuzz.net, Stephen Haywood, and I will always be very grateful for Stephen and all his help. He is my inspiration for all this. He runs a site called thetechbuzz.net. You'll always see it on this show. He is tremendous. He does not ask for very much, if anything, and he is a fantastic person. Not only a great broadcaster, but a great person. I want to also invite you guys, if you can. He does a show called the Weekly Roundup tonight at 6 p.m. Every Monday night at 6 p.m. It will be at the techbuzz.net. I believe he may also simulcast the Blab, but I'll tell you to go to techbuzz.net, and you can get everything right there. Pre-show usually starts about 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also want to point out that he does a broadcast show, Broadcast Now, on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Pre-show usually starts about 5:30 p.m. Hardcore broadcasting, if you like to talk broadcasting, like to talk about gear and everything in the broadcasting world, that's a great show to check out as well. So the techbuzz.net, please check that out. Also want to give a shout out to Mark, our own Mark Rogers. This is the Mark and Macy show. I know we were going to talk about it this week, but maybe next week we'll continue that discussion. Search Mark and Macy on YouTube. You'll find them over there. They I know that Walter's in the Blab chat room. He's a big fan. And Mark, you've come a long way with this show. And Macy Golder, who is your co-host, very enthusiastic. I think she is fairly new out of college, or I'm not sure if she still is in college or not.
No, she's been out for, I believe, 3 years. So she has a number of things going on, both writing and broadcasting on the internet, in addition to what we're doing. Yeah, she does a great job. We're having a lot of fun. Last thing I'll say before I should run here is, yeah, I look forward to kind of playing out over the next few weeks where we've been, where we are now, where we're headed. Um, and yeah, she's amazing. She does a great job. We seem to be on the same page in regards to what we want this to be. And it was funny because I'm trying to put together kind of a best of at this point for a number of reasons. So I went through the first three shows, which I thought at the time, hey, we're really in sync. We're really have a great rapport, and we felt comfortable from pretty much the first show. But now I watched the first three shows, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Fortunately, we've come a long way. I will make this disclaimer for Macy. That was yesterday, or that was last week's show, and she had flooring construction going on at her house, and she found like a closet in her parents' bedroom or something to just try to get as far away from that sound as possible. So we didn't have the best look last week, but we knocked it out.
Oh, no worries. I would have played more of that, but I forgot I didn't set it up for my audio, so my audio probably cut out there. So I can only play a little bit of it. But yeah, check that out, Mark and Macy. If you search Mark and Macy on YouTube, you'll be able to find it. I think you do your show on Thursday nights live on Blab, right? Normally,
yes, we do.
As long as everything's working,
yeah,
on the Blab side. But I think is it 7 p.m.
We usually get together about 6:45 and talk things over. So yeah, we hit the air close to 7 o'clock.
Excellent, very good. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching us here. People stuck around. I want to thank everyone for sticking around. We had a little late start today, but I think it was worth it. We had a great discussion. A little different show than what we normally talk tech, but we talked a little bit about on-camera stuff. We invite you to check out BTS Live during the week. We'll be showing replays. Check out the Facebook group, and also be back here next Monday. We'll be back here next Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, for another edition of BTS Live. Thanks, Mark. Thanks. It was a great show.
Definitely.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you next Monday.